Count Nefaria, deceased. Real name, Count Lucchino Nefaria. Occupation, head of the Nefaria family of the Magia, later an independent, self-employed criminal strategist. Identity, publicly known. Legal status, Italian citizen with a criminal record in the United States. Former aliases, the Dream Maker, the Dream Master. Place of birth, Rome, Italy. Place of death, New York City. Marital status, widower. Known survivors, Countess Giulietta Nefaria, daughter. See Madame Mask. Group affiliation, former leader of the Nefaria family of the Magia and unofficial leader of the entire Magia. Former employer of the original Animen, leader of the Second Lethal Legion. First appearance, Avengers number 13. Final appearance, Iron Man number 116. History. Count Lucchino Nefaria was the descendant of a long line of Italian noblemen and had inherited a vast fortune. Nefaria was a man of unusual contradictions. He was conservative in many of his tastes and attitudes, and therefore dressed in the fashions Italian noblemen wore much earlier in the century. On the other hand, Nefaria was fascinated with technological advances and throughout his life commissioned scientists to create inventions that were far in advance of contemporary science. Nefaria also greatly valued his family tradition of utter respectability, yet his lust for even greater wealth and power led him to making himself a powerful figure in the Magia, the notorious international crime syndicate which has its origins in southern Europe but included no noblemen. See Magia. As a young man, Nefaria quickly made himself a powerful force in the Magia through offering large sums of money to established mafiosi to work for him, through financing major criminal operations for the Magia in return for shares of power, through the advanced weaponry his scientists devised for him, and through his own immense talent for criminal strategy. The Magia men who left their original families to work for Nefaria became the basis of his own family. The other European Magia leaders allowed Nefaria's family to remain within the Magia for fear that if his organization severed all ties with them, it would become a formidable opponent. Nefaria married a woman named Renata and hoped she would bear him a son who would carry on the Nefaria line. However, Renata died giving birth to their only child, a daughter, Giulietta. Nefaria had been so cunning that until his exposure by the Avengers years later, virtually no one outside the upper echelons of the Magia knew of his involvement in crime. However, Nefaria feared that one day his criminality might become public knowledge. He also feared that one of the many Magia leaders who resented his power might attempt to strike at him through his child. Therefore, he forced a Wall Street financier named Byron Frost, who owed him a very large debt, to raise Giulietta as his own daughter. So it was that Giulietta grew to adulthood under the name of Whitney Frost, not knowing her true name and parentage. The Nefaria family established inroads into the United States over the decades and controlled to a certain extent various other Magia families' operations there. The newly formed Avengers spent much of their time in the early history of the group in capturing Magia criminals and causing the shutdown of many profitable Magia criminal operations. Count Nefaria decided to deal with the Avengers himself. Having planned to move to America anyway, Nefaria had his ancestral castle in Italy disassembled stone by stone and reassembled atop the New Jersey Palisades. He announced that he was opening the castle to the public and that profits from admission fees would be donated to charity. He invited the Avengers to the opening day ceremonies. Once the Avengers were inside the castle, however, Nefaria trapped them under so-called time transcender beams, which, in effect, put them into suspended animation. Nefaria then created life-size hologram-like images of the Avengers, which he could project over great distances, which he could cause to move like living humans, and through which he could project recreations of the real Avengers' voices. Nefaria caused the images to publicly proclaim that the Avengers were going to seize control of the United States. As a result, the real Avengers, once they were set free, found themselves in conflict with the United States Army. The Avengers finally defeated Nefaria, who confessed his guilt in framing them. The Avengers were cleared, and Nefaria was publicly exposed as a criminal and deported to Italy. Many of Nefaria's criminal allies and employees deserted him, and he was now no more than one among many Magia family heads. Sometime after Nefaria's exposure as a criminal, Byron Frost died, and Nefaria revealed to Whitney Frost that he was her true father and intended to train her to become his eventual successor as head of his criminal organization. Horrified, Whitney refused, but Nefaria threatened to publicly expose her as his daughter, thereby causing her to lose all of her respectable friends if she remained adamant. Whitney told her fiancé what had happened, and he ended their engagement. Months later, in despair, Whitney began her training under Nefaria and quickly became his second-in-command. Nefaria eventually launched an unusual blackmail scheme. Nefaria created an enormous dome that sealed Washington, D.C. off from the rest of the world and that could not be penetrated, except through Nefaria's own secret methods, by any means that would not endanger the people trapped within it. Nefaria announced that if he was not paid a large ransom, he would withdraw all the oxygen from the city, thereby asphyxiating all of its inhabitants. The original X-Men thwarted Nefaria's scheme, the people of Washington, D.C. were saved, the dome was destroyed, and Nefaria was imprisoned. Since her father was now in prison, Whitney Frost became leader of the Nefaria family of the Magia. Sometime later, Nefaria was freed from prison by criminals in his employ, but the Magia no longer wanted to be associated with him due to his notoriety from capturing Washington, D.C. From now on, Nefaria acted entirely independently of the Magia, even including his own family. Nefaria's next blackmail scheme was even more colossal than his previous one. With the aid of the Animen, he invaded and took control of the North American Air Defense Command Center at Valhalla Mountain in Colorado. Nefaria demanded that each nation on Earth pay him an enormous ransom, or else he would use the center's Doomsmith command system to launch all of the United States nuclear missiles. The new X-Men halted Nefaria's scheme this time. One of the X-Men, Thunderbird, leapt atop the plane in which Nefaria made his escape and attacked it with his superhuman strength until it exploded in midair. Thunderbird was killed, but Nefaria teleported himself to safety. But now Nefaria was virtually destitute. He decided he would have himself given superhuman powers greater than those of virtually any other human being. Nefaria formed the Second Lethal Legion, consisting of the Living Laser, the original criminal Power Man, and the Whirlwind. Nefaria then had Professor Kenneth, originally Klaus, Sturdy, former chief assistant to Baron Heinrich Zemo, increase these three criminals' powers for roughly an hour and sent them to battle their old enemies, the Avengers. But Sturdy and his assistants had also analyzed the cellular and genetic structure of the three superhumanly powerful criminals and used their findings to duplicate their powers in Count Nefaria, but magnified 100-fold. Once empowered, Nefaria mortally wounded Sturdy so that he could never give equal powers to someone else. But the dying Sturdy told Nefaria that his new powers were causing him to age at incredible speed so that he would be dead in 2 days. Sturdy said that only he himself could control the aging process, but now he could not because he himself would be dead. Crazed with fear and rage, Nefaria attempted to destroy New York City, but was stopped and captured by the Avengers. Nefaria became a feeble, wizened old man who had to be kept alive with special life support systems. Nefaria was kept in Avengers' custody while the Avengers sought a cure for him. Whitney Frost, believing that he was not receiving proper care at Avengers Mansion, had the 4 original Ani-Men break into the mansion and bring Nefaria to her. Nefaria demanded that the Ani-Men bring Anthony Stark to him so that he could be persuaded to find a cure for him. Madame Mask was in love with Stark and knew that he was the original Iron Man and agreed very reluctantly, on the condition that Stark not be harmed. Nefaria accepted her terms but had no intention of keeping his word. Stark, as Iron Man, ended up battling the Ani-Men in his own study. Madame Mask fled with Nefaria to one of Stark's laboratories, where, heartbroken at having to choose between filial duty and her lover, she compromised by using a Jupiter landing vehicle to hold Iron Man at bay so that he could not recapture her father. Iron Man's battle against the vehicle caused it to fall so that not only did it sever Nefaria's life support system, but it crushed Nefaria's body, killing him immediately. Iron Man had not intended Nefaria's death, but Madame Mask was traumatized by witnessing the accidental killing of her father through her lover's actions, and eventually returned to the leadership of the Nefaria family of the Magia. Height, 6 feet 2 inches, at prime. Weight, 230 pounds, at prime. Eyes, blue. Hair, black. Powers. Due to Professor Sturdy's treatment, Count Nefaria briefly possessed the powers of the living laser and the whirlwind magnified 100-fold. See, living laser, whirlwind. As well as superhuman strength that was never measured but which supposedly surpassed that of the Hulk.